Hey everyone, pop in the chat if you can hear me. I want to make sure we got a good hot mic here. Yep, can hear you. Awesome. Heck yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and send out an email to have some people join us today. All right. Make sure this link is live here. Put it in the chat where you're joining us from here. All right. I expect we'll have some more people. They're going to be joining us here in a second. Jared from Philly, Hannah, Oakland, Kristen, Phoenix. We got Sacramento, Queens in the house, St. George, Utah. Get some water real quick while we're waiting a couple more people to join us here. Whew. So raise your hand if you've been personally victimized by FedLoan Servicing. You can put that in the chat too if you want, in addition to where you're from. Hand raised, Hannah says. We've got Danny from Florida. We got Richmond in the house. So I expect we'll hopefully have a few more people joining us here as I let the email list know about, about the thing starting. So I've got a list of questions. Dan is a consultant of ours, Dan Rooker in the chat. He's going to be helping us answer some of these questions that you guys have today. The purpose of today's conversation on YouTube Live is really to just kind of vent a little bit about FedLoan Servicing and to get your questions answered about FedLoan Servicing, because I expect this is going to be a pretty big deal. With this big transition that's going to be happening sometime in December or possibly a few months after December. And let's say, yep, Dan just shouted out, hey, everyone, if Travis isn't answered, just at me. Yeah, so you can see Dan in the comments. If you have any questions that you want to make sure get asked, Dan will kind of go through everybody's comments and make sure we get something in front of me. So just a couple intro comments. I've got a list of comments or questions that people submitted from social media, so we'll definitely go through those. But I want to kind of do a little bit of a rant about FedLoan Servicing while we have everyone joining us. So FedLoan Servicing is owned by this thing called FIA, Pennsylvania Higher Education, I think Assistance Agency or something like that. It's something like that. It's basically the state loan authority for Pennsylvania. And before servicing federal student loans, they would help people in Pennsylvania make loans to those people. They would help service loans for some commercial customers. They were kind of like a sleepy agency that people just could forget that existed, right? And then the problem is they took over a huge portion of the government's federal student loan portfolio. And I think FedLoan Servicing was particularly inept. If you look at the comparison of it to other loan servicers, in my opinion, FedLoan Servicing is probably the worst, if not one of the worst, based on a lot of different metrics. I would also say that the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program was not designed very well as also. So if you took kind of incompetence mixed with FedLoan Servicing's incompetence, the two things put together made for a really bad mix. And so what has happened during the pandemic is these student loan servicers, they actually don't make money for the most part off of the interest that you pay. A lot of people think that's the case. They actually just make money from the Department of Education for the most part. Now they do make some money off of some old loans called FEL loans, but that's kind of niche. Mainly the thing they make money on is contract payments from the Department of Education. So Department of Education was doling out these payments to these servicers during the pandemic for basically not doing anything, right? I mean, they were answering phone calls, but they didn't have to collect payments. They didn't have to follow up with anybody that's in collections or anything like that. And so they were getting paid something for nothing. And now it's very clear that these servicers are going to have to do a lot of something and get 40 to 43 million people back into repayment all at once. And FedLoan Servicing was already told, you're terrible, you're probably going to get fired. And so this is kind of FedLoan kind of jumping in front of the situation and just saying, you know what, we're going to fire ourselves and put you in a terrible situation, Department of Education and millions of borrowers, because now you have no choice but to negotiate some punitive short-term kind of contract that Department of Ed almost has no choice but to negotiate to try to get people through this transition phase from FedLoan to a new servicer. So because of that, I think that FedLoan Servicing is going to have a few months after the end of its contract in December of 2021, where they're going to work on doing some things like finishing up certifying, any payment counts that were requested and that are outstanding. I think that they're going to work with the new servicer to try to make sure most of the data transfers over. So I don't think necessarily that December 2021 is set in stone. I do think that it might go a little bit longer than that if you have people work at the Department of Ed that just basically decide, we have no choice but to pay out for this. So let's look at a couple questions here. So one person asks, when should I recertify my income with FedLoan since they're getting fired? So, FedLoan getting fired in December 2021, that's what you want to kind of prepare for, right? It seems very likely that the payment and interest pause is going to be extended until, my guess is January of 2022, January 31st, 2022. If I was a betting man, that's what I would say. So the reason for that, and hopefully everyone can still hear me okay. Technology. So anyways, so to answer your question, when should you certify? I think that whenever they tell you to. That's the short answer. Don't recertify early just because you think you need to. Okay. So just because you think you need to doesn't mean that you should recertify early, because what they're going to do is they're going to go back and pull whatever income you had back when payment stopped, and they're going to start your payments up probably at that level initially. Now, some servicers might have asked you to already recertify, okay? But I'm saying if they haven't asked you to recertify and it's in your interest to do so and payments start up again, then you can just let that new payment be your payment and they will give you credit for that, until which point they say, hey, guess what? You have to certify now. So for a lot of people, their certification date is actually in the NSLDS data file, which is the central database that's stored at studentaid.gov. You can actually log into that by going to studentaid.gov, logging in, going to My Data, finding where your name is in the top right-hand corner, and then downloading your NSLDS data file. And if you kind of just Control F and search it for certification date, you'll see your IDR certification date in that document, and you can go and try to find when your typical certification date is. A lot of people were reporting to us that they were getting their recertification dates moved manually to 2022 already. So it depends on the servicer, and each servicer is unfortunately going to be different when payments and interest do start again. So that's what I would say about FedLoan Servicing recertification dates. Do it when you're asked to, unless it benefits you to do it earlier. So for example, let's say that this person had an income drop, then I would say recertify right away at studentaid.gov. You can go to manage IDR plans and click on that at studentaid.gov, and you can go in and recalculate your payment is what the button says, and then you can get a lower monthly payment. So I would recommend somebody do that if their income fell. But if your income has increased since the beginning of the pandemic, then I would recommend waiting until you're absolutely asked to and forced to. So let's see here, some other questions. One person wants to know, do you have any insight how long it takes to review employer certification forms? They're saying now it's student aid, who's handling the certification forms? So that's a great question. So, what we would say is, if you go through and I think we just had a discussion about this, Dan, at our last consultant meeting. So feel free to put it in the chat if you remember the exact words that one of our consultants, Megan, used. But if you go through the PSLF help tool now, which I believe is part of FedLoan's website, you can actually look up your employer and by employer ID number, I believe, and you can actually find a pre-approved list of employers, which speeds up the process a lot faster. So in other words, if you're going through the PSLF help tools on either studentaid.gov or FedLoan's website, maybe look both places. Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure which site it is, and it's in one of the two. And go and try to find your employers in that list and sort of pre-populate everything when you're sending in your employer certification form. It will drastically speed up that processing of your ECF form. And when I say drastically, I mean drastically, because it's already an employer that'll be pre-approved in the system. And so if you can just find that employer, and then that's already sort of pre-populated and pre-approved. So then they're just looking for when are your start dates and end dates or something. And did your employer sign it? And then you can go and upload that with a picture of your phone. You can just take a picture on your phone and just upload that photo, like from Google Photos, for example, into the FedLoan database or the student aid database, whichever one it was. At the top of my head, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but I don't remember. Hopefully, maybe Dan will be able to help me out. So let's see here. Yeah, so I will say this. A couple of people are talking about the frustrations about not having their loan certified. So I'll say that if you do not have if you go in like pure manually and submit the actual PDF like paper form and mail it in, that is the longest certification process that exists known to man. So in other words, if you send in that PSLF certification form by mail, it will be months and months before it gets certified. You used to have to do it that way, but there's been improvements on the websites where you no longer have to do it that way. The way we're recommending, like the best practice for our clients, is to find that employer in that pre-approved list, making sure that's done first, then getting it signed by your employer, and then just uploading that document in photo form to your account. So, okay, so Katrina is asking, what is the update with news where the government did not forgive loans for many applicants that followed the forgiveness program and worked for a job for 10 years, the right job? So here's one thing that I can share, and it's a little bit of a grim, like dark humor kind of thing. So FedLoan Servicing, we talked about this in our last consultant meeting. FedLoan Servicing, for the first time ever, forgave more loans from PSLF than death last year. That's a little awkward statement to make, but in 2020, 5,000 people were forgiven by FedLoan from PSLF, and then about 4,200 were forgiven due to death at FedLoan Servicing. So that is not good. I mean, that the number is still that low, but it is drastically improving. When we've done surveys, we found that basically half of the PSLF forgiveness has happened in the past 2 months. I mean, so we expect that trend to continue. So it's going to really continue to be exponential. So let's see if I'm going to look for Dan here to see if he has any other questions he tagged. Feel free to keep those questions going. Let's look at some of the ones from our social media live stream here. So one person's wanting to know, why is FedLoan getting fired? What a great question. I mean, so I think it's pretty clear that they did a bad job. They didn't do what the Department of Education really paid them to do, which is to serve borrowers in the best way possible. And they kind of didn't. I mean, there's various reasons why that is. I think that, part of it is they're trying to not hand out forgiveness that they're not supposed to. You can kind of understand that that's important, right? To only forgive the loans that are supposed to be forgiven. Certainly if somebody applied that wasn't eligible and didn't get forgiveness, then that would probably get them in a lot more trouble than not forgiving somebody's loans. So there's like a misplaced incentive structure there because they're clients of, or they're paid by the Department of Education instead of the customers, right? So they answer to the Department of Education more so than any of the customers. The other reason I think that they're getting fired is I think that they just saw the writing on the wall that they were going to be fired, and I think that they wanted to preempt it. So it's kind of like if you know you're going to be fired from your job, do you wait for your boss to tell you, hey, guess what? You're done. Get out of here. Or, do you quit or hand in your resignation letter right before like a key project that is really going to hurt them if they get rid of you at that time, right? So I think that that's kind of the issue at play here. I think is FedLoan was going to get fired anyway, and they saw an opportunity to do so on their own terms and extract maximum leverage. So in my opinion, that's kind of why they're getting fired. So in terms of new servicers, a couple people are asking about new servicers. So here's just a speculative guess. So there's a couple different servicers that could be your new servicer. The two top candidates, in my opinion, would be Ed Financial and Mohila. During the Trump administration, it was actually kind of broadcast that all the servicers were getting fired and replaced by Ed Financial and Mohila. Mohila stands for the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority. Now it's very unclear with the Biden administration if all these servicers are going to be fired or not. I think that one thing that's kind of interesting is Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority, aka Mohila. Mohila is very similar to FedLoan Servicing, which is the state of Pennsylvania's higher education loan authority. Plus, Mohila and FedLoan operate under the same back-end processing system. They use something called Compass. So also Mohila uses a FedLoan kind of sister company called AES to help them service loans when they have problems with it. So I think that it would be most natural for FedLoan to probably send everything over to Mohila. So I'm going to bet that your servicer in 2022 is going to be Mohila instead of FedLoan Servicing. That's just a guess. Now with Ed Financial, might just random throw a dart in the dark guess is that Ed Financial is going to probably replace Navient at some point. That's just a guess. I can't predict that super well. I will say that Navient's headquarters is in Delaware. I think that there's some evidence that Ed Financial being in Tennessee That was the state of the higher education chairman in the Senate during the Trump administration. And then Mohila, number 3 person in the Senate, was senior senator from Missouri. So there's a little bit of evidence of like political like favoritism based off of the servicers and what states they come from. So it wouldn't be too shocking to me to see Navient retained, given that President Biden's from Delaware. But now he's president of the whole country, not just a senator from a state too, right? So I could also easily see them getting rid of Navient too. So a lot of other questions coming in here. Do we think that so one person says, CG says, do you think denied certifications are going to be reviewed by Department of Ed? Or do you think others are going to have to reapply? So what I would say to this is, I think that we decided that the fastest way to get it reviewed is just complain to like the Department of Education, like Ombudsman or the CFPB. One of those complaints will probably get your file in an expedited review process. The thing that guarantees it is if you send a contact to your constituent services office for your senator or your representative. So specifically, like if you send, just type in like whoever your congressperson or your senator is, and just type in like constituent services office. Now, if you want to go next level, look for the person who's on the higher education committee. And if they happen to be your congressperson or senator, then like that's the person you should use because they're in that, education policy space. But if not, I would just use whoever you think gives you the most oomph. If it's in California or New York or Texas or something, it's probably going to be your congressperson because those states are so big. If you're in a smaller state, I'd probably go with the senator. But then just contact that constituent services office and then ask for an expedited review of your PSLF payment counts if they've come back inaccurately. That's really fixed most of the problems people have had. I would say it fixes them probably within 2 weeks. And I'm not really exaggerating there. Once the office gets that letter and they get involved on your behalf, I've really seen some miracles happen. And I'm not exaggerating. Just because, FedLoan Servicing gets that really official letter from a congressperson or a senator and they think, oh, bleep, I better respond to this or else this is going to be a problem, right? It's the same kind of reason that, all the servicers had to answer Senator Elizabeth Warren's letter to the servicers when she asked, what are you doing to prepare for payments and interest to start again? So let's see a couple other questions we've got here. Okay, so somebody's asking about the new guidelines with making lump sum payments towards your loans with getting them to count towards PSLF. So the answer to that is yes. So specifically what used to happen is you used to say, let's say you were doing like NHSC, which is the scholarship program that gives you, again, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but let's say it's $25,000 towards your loans, right? Or let's say it's $30,000 towards your loans. What used to happen is you have to make a lump sum on your loans, and that can be used for 1 month of credit towards PSLF. Obviously, that's a huge waste of money. Maybe some other examples would be like we see a lot of hospitals that will pay physicians in sort of out of the way areas lump sum payments towards their student loans, and they require it to be used as a lump sum on the student loan. They won't give it to the physician. And then that would be even worse than basically not getting anything at all, because in some cases you would have to pay income taxes on that money, and it would only count for one payment towards PSLF. And so the hospital is wasting the money. You were having to pay income taxes, and you were getting 1 month of payment count. What changed is FedLoan Servicing, in conjunction with the Department of Ed, said, well, that's kind of a dumb rule. We're going to make it so that if you make a lump sum payment, then it can count for up to 12 months of credit. Now, the problem is you have to pay attention to when is your IDR kind of year up. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have to certify in June and your new payment starts in July. So you would want to make sure that lump sum payment hits right after your new monthly payment gets calculated and it's due. So for example, let's say your new IDR payment is due July 15th. I mean, I'm just making a number up here, okay? And so you make a lump sum payment of $30,000 on July 15th, that can count for July until June. So a maximum of 12 months of credit. It would make a lot more sense if they did it like on a calendar year. But unfortunately, it's like different from borrower to borrower because everybody's recertification dates are different. So that's just something that you want to be aware of. If you're getting a big lump sum benefit towards your loans, you want to make sure that it's used, at the right time so that you can get the maximum benefit. But that is a welcome change because it used to be much worse than that. Do I have a form of request, someone asks, to send to a senator or congressman? I think our team probably does. We might even have it on the website somewhere. If you type student loan planner .com and then constituent services into Google, you'll probably find an example, or at least an example, couple paragraphs of things that we've talked about in the blog. In general, I would just say, find the constituent services form, and it's always great because like these Congress and Senator offices, they have like, share your opinion on legislation, and the other button is like constituent services. And it's pretty funny because the share your opinion on legislation, everybody in the world's contacting them on that, right? So that's like the black hole. And then there's the constituent services where they really take that pretty seriously because they know that that's a way that they can have an incumbency advantage and get reelected, right? So all you have to do is just click on that button and then explain that it's for like dealing with a federal agency or federal casework or something. And then you just explain who has your loans, and then just explain your problem. And somebody from their office really will reach out, and you don't have to like write the perfect letter. I would just explain what's happened in plain English and basically say you're just asking for an expedited, review of your PSLF payment count with the news that FedLoan Servicing might be transitioning away from servicing student loans. Let's see, a couple more people. Jennifer from St. Louis, Latoya from St. Louis. Let's see, a couple people. Brooke from New Orleans. Welcome, y'all. All right, so let's see. Someone's asking if they can reduce their AGI if they're doing PSLF. They're maxing out their 403B, HSA, and let's see, in SEP IRA, can I reduce my AGI if I switch to a traditional IRA? Bria, the answer is probably no. The traditional IRA is really only good for if you have only access to that and that alone, because it's a limit of $6,000 for people under 50. That's a pretty small limit. Your 403B and your SEP IRA both have much higher limits than that. So good little break topic to keep y'all all awake, right? So let's see a couple other questions here. So we're getting into some more investing questions, which is totally cool. So hit us up with some investing questions right now. Or you can also talk about FedLoan if you want, but I think that'd be kind of fun to talk about investing for the next maybe few minutes. So, a couple things that happened to me personally, we bought a house. Oh my gosh, or at least we're under, the contract for one. I will say that I followed my own advice, less than 2 times your joint household income. I'll say that if you're handy, or you don't mind old appliances and kitchens, then those are the houses to target right now. So we got our house for like tens of thousands under the asking price, just because people don't want to renovate right now because renovations are so stressful because nobody's available. So that's just me buying some time here while we get some of these investing questions in. So a couple people are asking, okay, so this is a good one that Wesley asks, is there a chance for people who are under the wrong repayment plan to have those payments counted towards PSLF? The answer is yes. It's called TEPSLF, Temporary Expanded PSLF. That's a program that you can now apply towards with the same application as on PSLF. That's one that if you believe that you qualify, I would highly encourage people to, get that constituent services office involved because they can help you through that process if you believe that you do qualify for TEPSLF. So what TEPSLF is this limited program where they said, okay, anybody that had direct federal loans before 2010 probably was on the wrong repayment program to get it after 10 years. So people were on like extended, standard. They were on all these other plans, graduated, let's say, and they were on an income-based plan. So temporary expanded PSLF basically says, as long as you had direct loans and you were trying to be on a plan, as long as you're on an income-based plan for the last 12 months of payments, then we're going to give you credit for all those payments that were made under the wrong payment plan, and we'll still forgive your loans. Now, the problem is they only said that this was going to be the case for direct loans. The problem is before 2010, most people that had direct loans had so from undergraduate programs and not from professional schools. So that's one of the problems with temporary expanded PSLF is, again, they limited it so that it would not affect loans that were under the FFEL loan program. And the FFEL loan program was a much, much larger program before 2010 that, lent maybe about 80 or 90% of all federal student loans. And it was really like 99% of professional school loans. So that's why a lot of people are not even qualifying for that backup PSLF program because of the way that one was written. So if you kind of go back to where are all the problems with these programs, they're all written really poorly. So like, are the, servicers doing a bad job? 100% absolutely, right? But it would be kind of like, professional game players, that's being too kind. I was going to say professional game players are playing a board game that has terribly written rules and they still do a bad job. I mean, the servicers are not professional board game players, right? They're not even close. But just, imagine playing a board game with poorly written rules. You're going to have poor outcomes. That's kind of what's going on right now. So let's see a couple other questions here. Bria asks, if you set up a biweekly payment schedule, can that expedite your PSLF forgiveness? The answer is no. You get 12 months of credit per calendar year. There's no exceptions. I would not set up a biweekly payment scheme. Biweekly payments are a way to get out of debt a little faster because it kind of makes you make an extra payment over the course of the year without noticing it, because people get paid biweekly, but payments sometimes are monthly. And so, every given year there's, if you think about it, there's, 12 months in a year. Semi-monthly would be 24 payments a year, but biweekly ends up being 26. So you just make an extra 2 payments and it helps you get out of debt a little faster without even realizing it. So that's why people set that up, but I would not set that up for PSLF. Okay, so one question that Sue's got is her husband finished fellowship and's got a private practice job. Should we invest the deferred payments or refinancing now and start paying the loans off? So here's kind of my thought on that. I think that inflation is a serious risk. I think that if you're 100% sure that you're going to stay, in private practice, then, and that, you're definitely needing to refinance in that, you have a debt to income ratio below 1.5 to 1, meaning that you earn more than 200,000 and have less than 300,000 in debt, right? Because that's a ratio. 300 divided by 200 is 1.5 or lower. That's what I mean by the 1.5 to 1 debt to income ratio. So the question is should I wait to refinance or should I do it now? So, this is kind of what I'm suggesting to a lot of people. I think that the interest and payment pause will be extended from September 30th all the way to January 31st. So I think you have to bake that into your planning. And then I think that what I would do if I was a high income physician, or, my wife's a high income physician, she works in academics, but if she was in the private sector and we were trying to decide, do we refinance her loans together? What I would do right now is I would apply, and I'm saying our website because we have the highest cash bonuses of anywhere. I would apply at studentloanplanner.com/refi to Common Bond. I would get a 20-year fixed rate. And if I was including at least one federal student loan, I would make sure by reaching out to the customer care team, you could just say in the chat, like Travis at Student Loan Planner said, you were offering 0% for 6 months for 20-year fixed rate loans that include at least one federal student loan in the refinance. So that would get you 6 months of 0% interest. The 6 months of 0% interest, today is July, so you figure August, September, October, November, December, January. So basically like mid-January is when that 0% interest with Common Bond would expire. And then what I would do, and like folks at Common Bond might get kind of upset at me at saying this, hopefully not, but what I would do is then I would apply again at the end of January when the 6 months 0% interest has expired. And the rate at that point would probably be in the low 3 percentile range, like 3.2, 3.3, something like that. And I would have gotten a $550 bonus from Common Bond and a $500 bonus for over $1,000 cash bonus if you had done that in 2021. So then in January, you apply again, and let's say you apply through, say, Laurel Road, and then you get a 2.7, let's say. Well, then you could refinance from a 3.3 20-year fixed to a 2.7 with Laurel Road and pick up an additional $1,000 cash bonus, part from them and part from Student Loan Planner. And so that's actually like a pretty effective strategy, because what it does is it says, well, I'm going to get the 0% interest, this almost the same terms as the federal interest pause. So I'm not going to give anything up there. I'm going to lock in a low 3-something% interest rate right now so that it's never higher than that. And then I'm going to see if I can get an even lower rate once the 0% interest freeze expires on the federal loans. And so then you could just do the student loan refinance ladder, which is what we talk about, where you pay extra towards your student loans. Maybe you have a bonus, quarterly bonus or something, and you dump it into the student loans. And let's say you pay your $300,000 down to $200,000. So you could refinance it again from a 20-year to a 10-year keep about the same monthly payment, get a lower interest rate, and pick up another $1,000 cash bonus, all provided, you're refinancing six figures or an amount that qualifies for that max bonus. So hopefully that's not too long or too much detail. I'm very worried about inflation, not so much that I'm freaking out about it, but it's a serious risk. And so I think that, if you know for sure you need to refinance, given that there is a bank out there offering a 0% 6-month rate with no restrictions on leaving that once that's over, I would take advantage of that. A couple more questions, not about refinancing. So someone says they're thinking about going from repay to IBR for community property. So let's see, spouse stays at home, 5 kids affect that. So here's a little fun fact that a lot of people don't know. If you are doing community property returns or if you're filing separately, just in general. So if you do that, it doesn't matter who claims who on taxes. That's not what the Department of Ed certification form for IDR asks. They just say how many are in your family size. They didn't say how many did you claim on your taxes, right? So it goes back to answering the question that as it's written and not what you think it says, right? So the question that they ask is how many people is in your family size? The answer is, if you have 5 kids plus a spouse, that's be 7, including you, right? So you would just say 7, and it actually does not impact at all the tax return about who has to file where. But for anybody who hasn't heard of the breadwinner loophole, you should definitely Google that on our site if you live in one of the West Coast states, because you can split your income in 2 and basically pay a much lower rate than if you were doing 10% of both of your spouses and your spouse's incomes. So one person's asking about maternity leave. Let's see here. So for maternity leave, it's kind of like a gray area. It kind of depends on what's going on with your income. So if it's paid maternity leave, then your income is not really changing. It's staying the same, right? So it wouldn't be an opportunity for you to recertify your income because it wouldn't help you because it would be staying the same. However, if you're doing like short-term disability, for example, or you're taking time away from, or you're not making a paid income at all, or say you're doing FMLA where it's unpaid leave, the provisions of the PSLF program allow you to take 3 months a year of FMLA leave and count it towards, PSLF, provided that you're still making payments. Now, qualifying payments could be as little as 0 if you're making 0. So if you're making $0 a month during your paid maternity leave, what I would do is I would just contact your, I would go to the studentaid.gov, manage your IDR plans, and I would go to recalculate my payment. And then I would just go in and I would just put in your new income information and submit it, and then recertify it when they ask you for income again. And all of that time should count, including the 3 months, up to 3 months that you're away from work from FMLA. So that's kind of a fun little thing. So one person says, my income went to 0 after getting laid off during COVID. I went back and got paid. Now I'm starting a practice and it will be 0 again. Can I recertify at 0 again? So if you're at 0, you can't really go in and say that your income fell because it's still at 0, right? So what I would say is, when you do have to recertify your income again, you'll probably want to present tax returns. And then if your current income is lower than your tax returns, what I would do is I would make one payment, or let it make one payment on your current tax return, most recent tax return. Then I would go back and I would say, that your income changed, it went lower. That's what I would do. That way you can, steer clear of anything that might be kind of questionable. Someone wants to know, if you're going for pay, is it better to go for Roth and have tax savings later, or defer tax now to lower student loan payments? I'm actually a big fan of traditional and not Roth for student loan borrowers in general. The reason for that is, unless you are very wealthy, the traditional is almost always a better option. And the reason for that is because most people, make a lot more money during their working years than in retirement. Now you might say, well, what if tax rates go up? Well, if it goes up, it's probably going to go up for people at the very high end, the 400K plus side of things. And if you're at the 400K plus side of income already, then you're talking about saving at 37% or 35% plus state income tax plus 10% for student loans if you're going for forgiveness. So that's like 50% tax savings up front. I would find it pretty hard to believe that your tax savings would be that high in retirement. It's possible, but if it is, it's probably going to be similar So that's why I like to go for traditional instead of Roth. One question with refinancing, Ashley asks, will it kill your credit to keep bouncing around? So that's a great question. Like refinancing multiple places and bouncing around, will it hurt your credit? The answer is no. And the reason why it won't hurt your credit is because when you apply for a new student loan refinance, it dings your credit score maybe 5 to 10 points. And then that recovers after about 30 to 60 days is what we typically see. So who could get hurt by refinancing a student loan? Let me give you an example of what would not hurt you. So if you have like a 770 credit score, maybe let's say you're applying for a physician mortgage loan like we just did for a house. And let's say their cutoff is a 720 credit score for getting approved for the mortgage. They tell you do not apply for any other additional loans or installment loans or anything like that during the mortgage process because they tell you that because the worst thing ever would be you get denied your mortgage in the middle of closing. That'd be super stressful, right? And 99% of the time, or I should say 90% of the time, people applying for a new credit loan would actually not affect your mortgage. Well, when would it? Well, it would be one of those cases where you have a marginal case. Somebody's got like a 725 credit score. They apply for refinance. The 725 goes to 715. They cut off 720 for your credit score and you miss the mortgage. So in other words, that's the only time ever where student loan refinancing could remotely hurt you, in my opinion, from a credit score impact, is if you're in the middle of underwriting for a mortgage, you go out and apply for a student loan refinance right in the middle of underwriting, and you're right on the cusp of qualifying, which most people aren't. And then you drop right below that threshold just temporarily for that 30-day window, and then you miss the mortgage. So really that means, like, from a credit score impact, there's zero concern with refinancing student loans many times. The one thing I would not do is refinance like more than within a couple months. Like that would just they might, some of the loan service or loan companies might try to claw back the cash bonus even. I haven't heard of that from anybody, but if you're like borderline abusive about it, they might be unhappy. But if you're like applying at one place and 6 months later, you apply for another place, then that's not going to impact you really at all. So TEPSLF, Dr. Leo asks, should we apply for this now? Remember, you should be applying if you think you've got 10 years of credit in a nonprofit job or government job and that you had direct loans prior to 2010. If those are the things are both true, yeah, sure, you should definitely apply and see if you can get it. Let's see. Richard says, could any of these IBR plans be repealed or altered for current borrowers? The answer is yes, anything can be changed, right? I mean, like anything could be changed, but will it be changed? No. So, if Congress passed a law that said we're going to eliminate forgiveness for everybody, they could do that, right? But if you were going to change the terms of a loan program, you would need a supermajority because it's not a spending bill. It's like a policy bill, right? So you would need 60 votes in the Senate. And the group that's most likely to just completely eliminate forgiveness would it would be twofold. To be like your very progressive Democrats might want to repeal it for high income people, and your very conservative Republicans might want to eliminate it just for everybody, right? And so both of those groups would need 60 votes in the Senate to change anything, plus consent of the White House and Department of Education. And there's just no way that would ever happen. So all of the proposals to amend everything that we've ever seen have always grandfathered in and respected people in current repayment programs. And it's only gotten better if you want to think about it from that perspective in terms of people paying even less and getting more forgiven. Dan, Annette's asking for an answer to her question, so I probably missed that one if you want to call that one out. Let's see. +1 for Lauren's question. I'm sorry, folks, it's a little bit difficult to follow this here. So Lauren's asking, FedLoan sent a letter that her recertification is due in August. 2020 tax filing status is married. 2021 is filing separately to keep low payment. Will the new servicer honor that date? So I would say yes, because most likely the certification date is coming from the NSLDS. But I mean, the new servicer is very unlikely to set their own repayment certification date for everybody. I think that's why I think it's going to be Mohila, Lauren, is because Mohila and FedLoan use the same back-end servicing software. And so would you take a risk with all these borrowers changing hands if FedLoan's getting fired, of changing it over from one group to another? Would you take that chance of moving to a whole new software system? I would guess not. So I would assume that since they both use the same backend software, I would expect whoever the new person is going to keep the same recertification dates. Let's see. Latoya asked, do you recommend selling company stock to make lump sum student loan payments? Just remember there's tax implications of that. We tell people keep 10% or less in your company stock. Yeah, so keep 10% or less in your company stock. So if you already have more than that, then I would certainly look at selling some of that to pay student loans. Let's see. Someone's saying they follow the podcast. Thank you, everyone. Student Loan Planner podcast. Definitely check that out. I'm back in the hot seat doing podcasts again regularly now that I've got this pretty office that you can see. I wish y'all could see our, I'm looking at a golf course right now. It's so exciting, right? Exhilarating. That's outside my window. All right, let's do a few more questions. Maybe let's say 10 minutes more of questions. Cause I'm, got supposed to go to dinner at the in-laws tonight, so I can't be late for that, right? All right, so let's say someone's on a pay-as-you-earn plan, and if they take a year off to stay home with kids, will the payments be zero based on no income? And does that count as going towards the 20 years? The answer is yes, it does. Remember that for the 20-year forgiveness, there's no employment conditions at all. So, based off of if you recalculate your income based on your new income being zero, any of those payments would count towards the 20-year clock. Let's see here if we have some others. Annette says, can we count on Biden passing some kind of loan forgiveness bill? And another person asks, do we think pay-as-you-earn are going to go to 5% of income instead of 10? So that's a really great question. So, so the 5% question. So President Biden on the campaign trail proposed that he allow people to pay 5% of their income instead of 10. I think that's quite unlikely for graduate school loans. I think that he generally meant that for undergraduate loans only, with the idea that people at the low income scale side of things are paying too much on their student loans. That's kind of, I think, the policy goal is to lower those individuals' student loan payments. So we would expect if they did lower the income-based repayment amount, instead of dropping to 5% of income, which would get a lot of political resistance, I think, and blowback, what they might do instead is just increase the deduction that people can take before they take 10%. I could see that being something that might happen. I don't think the 5% of income is going to happen, though, if I had to guess. In terms of counting on President Biden to pass some sort of loan forgiveness bill, I don't know if we can count on him to do that. I say that, as someone from the perspective of a borrower who would be hoping that we would see additional forgiveness. I'll say this, I just posted this on Twitter. If you have more than $111,000 of student loan debt, you've already received $10,000 of cancellation from the pause in student loan interest. If that gets extended to the end of January, that's 4 additional months of zero interest, and you'll get additional cancellation. And people going for forgiveness, which a lot of the folks on this YouTube Live would have already gotten $10,000 of canceled student loans if your income is above $86,000. That's not the answer I'd like to give. But what I would say is try to look at it glass half full. I would say it's unlikely that we'll see student debt cancellation, just because I think that they're just not going to go there because of political reasons. I mean, I don't know the political calculus. I'm not a political expert, but I just think that they'll probably view it as something that they can skip with not a ton of repercussions. And the reason I say that is because we've done surveys of student loan borrowers of our community, and we always ask, how big up is student loans on your list of what you vote on? And even for student loan borrowers, it's like number 5 or 6 or something. It's quite interesting. Now, for some people, of course, it's number 1, but most people make their votes based off of other things. And so that's why I think we don't see a lot of political impetus to do a bunch of stuff on student loan debt, because people haven't become one issue voters on that yet. Let's see. Someone asks, what is my response to the mainstreaming of cryptocurrency? I mean, that's a great question. So I'll tell you, there's so many alternative assets out there right now. There's so many, all kinds of asset inflation and just in general. This is a good opportunity to mention we're coming out with I think the 5th fully updated version of our investing course that we do once every 6 months. And that's going to come out July 26th. It's Monday. We're going to have a $100 off coupon. I believe we're doing a giveaway today. Someone in our team is going to pick someone to get that. But we have a couple sections on asset price inflation, and it's really extraordinary to see some of the very highly valued assets out there. So here's a little fun fact. the current level of valuations in the stock market is actually worse relative to earnings than it was in October of 1929 when we had Black Tuesday. Now, it's not the worst ever. The worst ever was in the dot-com bubble that bust. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean necessarily what you think it means. And we're going to cover a lot more of that in our investing course for those of you that are interested. So you're all on the email list, so you'll get an announcement when that course goes live. But basically, you have to look at the value of assets relative to interest rates, try to predict what's going to happen to interest rates, and then you can know what kind of investing strategy you should have. So we go into that in detail on the investing course, and that would be a whole nother conversation. So just know that in terms of crypto, like I kind of see a lot of extreme speculation in the markets. If you just look across the board, there's extreme speculation. And from a market cycle standpoint, that tends to portend for market crashes. So if I had to predict, I think that we could be seeing some sort of big decline in the value of assets in general. And so we help you prepare for that in the investing course. And also I can say, just in a one sentence answer, if you buy and hold for the long term, it doesn't really matter that much what happens to short-term asset prices. But anyways, a couple more questions here. I'll do like 5 more minutes of questions, Dan. If someone asks if we've already done the investing course, can we review those revisions to the course? Absolutely. That's one of the values that we have in that investing course, is if you ever have bought it ever, this is, I think, like I've said, our 5th or 6th update that we've done to the material. I go in and I update the asset price returns in our spreadsheet, so you can model like how much money you would have made if you had invested starting in like 1900, or if you wanted to, if you started in 1980. I just updated the spreadsheet this morning, and if you started investing $1,000 a month 40 years ago, today you'd have $9 million, which is really pretty nuts. So let's see a couple more questions. Somebody says, I've got a lot of cash. What do I do with it? Basically. The right answer to that, I think, is like try to identify what kind of medium-term goals that you have and put some of the money in that first right now before dumping it all in the stock market. I would certainly put some of it in the stock market. But if you have a medium-term goal, like paying down student debt or saving for a down payment for a house or buying a new car, I would do that, because if you think that there could be inflation, then actually having some sort of asset that you can use for a long period of time would be a decent use of money. Now, statistically, the right answer is always invest in the stock market, because that's the highest return of capital for the average person, no matter what kind of market environment it's in. But I'll tell you personally, I've slowed down my investments in the stock market, although I've still continued my automated investing plan. I've slowed down my large lump sum purchases, and I've done a couple things because of the used car prices being so high relative to new cars, where I just basically traded into getting a new car instead of a used car that I expect that I can drive for 10 years. And that's one of the reasons why we bought a fixer-upper, instead of a brand new house that's completely renovated, with the theory that the fixer-upper houses are mispriced relative to the new houses. That's just like some random like personal life stuff that I can tell you that I've been doing. I'm not necessarily saying that that's right for everybody, but you always want to max out your retirement accounts no matter what the market environment is. You always want to have some sort of minimum amount you invest in a brokerage account no matter what the market environment is. And then over and above that, then you make tactical decisions. Then maybe you put some in alternative assets. Maybe you want to get involved in real estate more. Maybe you want to go and get another degree. Maybe you want to start your own business. I'll say probably always starting your own business is probably the best investment, because that's the thing you have the most control over, especially if you're in a healthcare field where the probability of success is pretty high. So let's take a few more questions here. What if you leave your PSLF eligible job after 120 payments are done, but before your loans are forgiven? Will Department of Ed, what will they do? Well, the current rule is you have to be enrolled in your job when you get it after the 120 payments. That's kind of a messed up rule. I think they're in the process of changing that, but I can't tell you for sure if they've changed that yet. Let's see. Someone says, a lot of my loans are going to be eligible first in December 2021. The rest are going to be forgiven several months later. I want to go out to IBR to get my payments lowered after the first round of forgiveness. When do I switch from repay to IBR? So that's a great question. What I would say is it depends on what kind of loans you have. If you have direct loans that are never been consolidated, then you can sign up for the standard 10-year plan and you don't even need IBR, because the only loans that you can't do the standard 10-year plan on are consolidated loans. So if that second set of loans is consolidated loans, then I would probably suggest changing from repay to IBR before you get PSLF on the first part so that you can stick to IBR on the second part. Because IBR has that cap where you never pay more than the standard 10-year plan. That's usually 1% of the loan amount that you have. So let's say that you've got $200,000 that gets forgiven first and $100,000 that gets forgiven second. The IBR cap would be 1% of the total loan amount. So that would be $3,000 while you had all of it, or 1% of $100,000 with the second part. So that'd be $1,000 a month on the second part. So that can be frequently 5 figures of savings, but from getting that correct. So that would be a good reason to reach out to our consultants if you needed more of a personalized answer than that. Let's see here. A couple more questions. If you're refinancing government loans to private, would you leave 10,000, 50,000, or 0 in case Biden does forgive something? I would leave 10,000. Somebody asked me this question. Actually, it was like a bank executive called me and wanted to know, we had a relationship with some other things we were working on. And he was just like, all right, tell me, like, do I leave anything behind? Like, is there going to be some sort of big cancellation that might happen? I think that if I had to put a percentage chance on it, let's say it's a 10% chance or 20% chance that they forgive 10,000. So, some people would say, well, you know what? Like, I just want it to all be in one piece and I don't want to have any left behind and I don't want to forget that I owe it or whatever. So what I would tell somebody is if you have any anxiety at all, just keep 10,000 behind just in case something happens. And I think we'll know that probably within the next 6 months or so. I mean, I think once you get into the midterms season after like February or March, like once you get into the spring, when the midterms election season kicks off a lot, I don't think they're going to want to do anything with cancellation because it would give Republicans a tool to use on the campaign trail. So that's kind of the time frame I'm monitoring that for. Cool. So if you have any other questions, I would put them in this YouTube chat, and one of our team members will get to it and try to answer your question after this. I'll say studentloanplanner.com/investing. That's going to be the investing course that we're going to launch on July of 26th, Monday. So we'll hopefully have you guys, some of you guys take part in that. I think it's the best thing that we do because it makes you the wealthiest of anything that we do. Knowing how to invest, especially in this environment with high asset prices and high potential inflation, it's a really dangerous environment for investing. So it's good to be educated. Also, for anybody that needs a follow-up consult, if you're an existing client or a first consult, this is also a good time to get a plan. And I'm not just saying that because it's self-serving. I think it actually is, because you want to get on the right payment plan before FedLoan moves you over so that all of your documents are like set and ready for that transition. And all that has to happen is just FedLoan just sends your data to the new servicer, and you don't have to figure out how to change repayment plans at that new servicer. So I would certainly look into that. And one more question here. Someone asks, I'll say, Chaka says, is there a date when an announcement must be made about a new servicer, or are we all just going to be waiting until December? Most likely, I think we'll all be waiting until December. But I stay in contact with rumors and officials, and I have sources and kind of confidential sources sometimes that share things with me that I can't necessarily disclose, but I figure out things quicker than the general public does because of the fact that I do this every day. So I will promise all of you that the second that I know something, you will know something. And maybe not be the second, because I don't want to hit anybody up on a Saturday afternoon, because hopefully you have something better to do than, listen to my stuff on a Saturday afternoon. But if it's a Thursday, a weekly update, you're going to get it notified, and we'll let you know who the new servicer is, and we have your back in all this. So I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for thank you so much for everyone that tuned in today. Again, if you have any questions, post them in the YouTube, like this YouTube video so other people can learn about student loans too. And again, refinancing deals out there, studentloanplanner.com. You've got that 0% for 6 months deal with Common Bond for a 20-year fixed. If they don't offer it to you, just tell them that Travis from Student Loan Planner said to reach out and check to see if it's offered. And then also we're seeing some of the servicers, I think like Laurel Road, that are offering rates below 3% for 20-year fixed, which I think is quite good as well. So if anybody has any questions, we'll look forward to getting them from you. But thank you so much for tuning into our YouTube Live. Hopefully we'll do this once a quarter or whenever there's like some sort of big major student loan emergency that needs to be discussed so that y'all can be relax and not have to worry about anything. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm Travis from Student Loan Planner. Peace out.